Ready, aim, release! Anyone see my mammoth? Hello! There we go. We're on. I don't know why Carlo randomly took like a few seconds to appear there. That was really random. But he's here. He hasn't been here for a week and a bit, 2 weeks. Right?
I am. I'm here, I think.
Are you doing anything interesting? Is there a reason you're here this week? Have you got anything interesting to say, seeing as you're now a rare appearance on this show?
No, never anything interesting to say. You know, just song is song, games are games.
Game is game. I've got wins. Is that what you meant to say constantly? I am good player. Yeah, Mikkel sayings, we need a new intro. That Othel feels bad. Yeah, no, Othel needs to go. I have a video that I've said before. It is sorted, like in terms of like, I know exactly what's going to happen. Carlo even knows exactly what's going to happen. I told him.
I'm glad that everybody's calling you out because you know what I mean. This is also on the list of things that you've been saying will change for the past year or so. So you know.
Not year. 4 months. But yeah, no, it's on the list of things to do. Alas, one doesn't get through the list very quickly anymore. Anyway, yes, we are another week down. Last week we obviously had the Welsh guys on. How did you find that, Carlo, talking to some Welsh people?
Well, I wasn't talking to them.
No, I was on your behalf, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it was interesting to hear from them. Really excited for the Welsh GT. I think that it will really help to round out the UK calendar.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I won't be there myself. I'll be in the US. You know, hopefully winning their calendar. But yeah, I hope it'll be a really, really good event, and you know, of the size of the Scottish GT.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like best of luck for all of
that. Yeah, cool. I do think the Welsh GT is shaping up to be hopefully for in my head it's going to be like the third or like second, third, first, whatever, you know, of the three big ones in the UK. It's going to be the biggest or the one of the bigger ones that we have in the calendar, not just this year but obviously in every year going forward as well, hopefully. Yeah, so if anyone hasn't noticed today's title, it is perfectly grammatically correct. No spelling errors were made in today's title, and we are going to look at something, a piece of news, if you call it that. I guess it's news. It is news, right? That came out of Germany. Right? So, for those of you who aren't aware, the German guys, the German Asmodee Germany, along with the likes of Ilya, Yannick, and all those guys, have been putting together a German event. They finally got confirmation that is going to be German nationals. Effectively, it is happening. You'll notice with Asmodee Germany. It is not something that is happening just as like other people have done it. Like, as much as the GT is an event that holds its own thing, it is just London GT as an event where, you know, all the guys are hosting that event. Part of that, this is actually being, you know, sponsored and being kind of developed and run with Asmodee Germany as a partner. Which is a massive step forward, I think, for events. And this whole thing is in German, so I'm not going to read it out. There is English translations. But the big bit hit is this bit here. I'll zoom right in on that, so if you can't see it at home on your screens, you get a nice big copy of it on the screen there. The best placed players of the tournament will qualify for the next World Championships, which will be hosted by Simon.
Prized Pikachu face.
Yeah. Uh, um, there is
You
something.
what?
Yeah, there is something weird about this. Two things I have to say. One, the fuck, there's a world championship. And two, can you really say the next? Because that implies there has been a previous. And as far as I'm aware, there hasn't. I don't know. It might just be me.
I mean, desire to know more.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Please, please tell us more.
yeah, what? Like, please, what? What? Where? When? What? And more what?
Who I reminds me of Flight of the Conchords, the rhinoceros piece they do where he's like, what, why, what, why, what? That moment where you can just say lots of questions because it really is. I mean, it's good.
It's the first. It's the first anybody's ever heard of it, right? Like,
Yeah. Like
so.
this is the first that anyone has heard of it to the point where, like, you guys, you Chris specifically, but Chris mainly being the contact that we've got with Seaman Organised Play, so Robert and the likes of that, has never mentioned it. Yeah,
No.
Chris saw
Yeah.
this and went, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, I mean, it's odd to announce that this tournament qualifies you for some other tournament that you haven't actually announced, right? Like
Yeah,
that's a missed announcement. But
yeah. Unless this is the announcement of it, but that's weird. I have nothing else to say. It's good, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, as always, there's just like want there to be more transparency. You know what this is a nationals.
Mhm.
Are all nationals that have is the Italian nationals, Spanish nationals, LGT, aka
French.
UK nationals,
Mhm.
US nationals, are they all qualifying for this world tournament? Because
That would make
none
it
of
fair.
like as part of the as you say as part of the people who are organizing the LGT, we have no information about that. As far as I know, I don't think any other nationals has knowledge of that. Or is the requirement that Asmodee are running this event, right?
Mhm.
And that's what makes it possible that this is now a world's qualifier, and that effectively only if Asmodee actually run the event
Mhm.
does it become viable as a qualifier for this world event. Crazy, yeah. Welsh nationals, yeah. Well, are we talking about a size requirement if the Welsh nationals makes 40, 50 people?
Yeah.
It is, and yeah, where are we holding this world?
I mean, that is
That's the big question.
at the risk of sounding too negative. I'm going to throw it out there. Worlds is going to be in the US.
Mm.
Um,
So US nationals part two.
yeah. Uh, Gen Con Part 5, maybe. It's I'm really stoked for it potentially being an event. I'm really happy that this is a thing that we can all look forward to, especially competitive players in the community now that can go, wait, hang on, there's something beyond now. There's something more than just winning this event or turning up at the national event. I'm not saying that everyone wins, but everyone plays for the national event because they believe it's important. Whereas if hey, top 4 at nationals in the various different national events maybe are kind of come together and have like this 48-man tournament that's international players from across the world, it's like, whoa, hang on a second. um, uh, so that would be awesome. There's also an interesting question, right, which I was going to broach. Um, with it being nationals that we're seeing, you turn up to the German nationals and you play in the German nationals and you do well, then you go, fuck it, I'm going to go to the LGT, and you turn up at the LGT and you do well. Then you turn up at like Spanish nationals and you win that one. Like, where is it's not going to be held in the US? Ilias said in chat. good start.
Wow.
Yeah, because I mean, the immediate thing for me, and it does isolate players somewhat, but the US players are likely going to have to get planes regardless. If it's held in like the US, they're still having to travel across country anyway. We've gone through this before. It's like traveling across a continent. The US, the UK, the EU player base, the Polish player base, very active communities. I do think somewhere like France or Germany would be a good situation for it, a good location. I don't think the UK would be appropriate, especially because actually you isolate at the moment with the UK and laws with EU travel and things like that. It would isolate a lot of European players accessing the UK potentially, um, but I think EU would be fine. Yeah, I don't know what you
I
think.
mean, yeah, like I feel like the player base is significantly stronger in Europe, right? Like
Hmm.
it seems,
It,
but maybe that's just a Eurocentric viewpoint. But
maybe.
every major country you can name 5, 6, 7 countries in Europe who all have player bases as big, as strong, and as active as the US. So to then hold it over there would went so far away from everywhere else. But there's active places across Asia, or
Yes,
Australasia,
I was going to
Australia itself,
raise
and
that
that's going to
exact
be
point.
miles for them, no matter what.
Raise that exact point. I mean, we haven't seen an Australian national event kind of occur yet, and in that part of the world, we haven't seen anything happening in Singapore much. Although there was a Singapore store that played, I believe, an event not too long ago. Indonesia, we know that the likes of Van and stuff have had events, I believe, in their stores. But again, it's the scenes are not large. There's also
Hmm.
the possibility that the World Championship will happen in Singapore, being the headquarters of CMON. Um,
Yeah,
which,
yeah.
hey, that you know what? As much as I think that would be really annoying and it makes travel difficult, I'm not going to complain that they hold it at their headquarters. I actually don't mind that. It would bother me a lot less if Asmodee ran like the US Nationals at their headquarters in the US. Like that would at least make sense.
Hmm. Hmm.
I have no problem with that. So you know, um,
I'm a
no,
little bit nervous that
interesting.
like they seem to want to run these things at cons, which aren't really designed for it. I'm a tiny bit nervous, particularly that it's been announced through Germany, that like suddenly they'll turn around and say, "Oh, by the way, it's at Essen,"
Yes.
which I don't think is a positive thing. Like there are events that are run for competitive gaming, and there are events that are not, and they are huge conventions, but they're not there for competitive gaming. And they've shown with things like Gen Con, which isn't widely accepted as being a convention for competitive gaming, that like that's what their tendency is towards, because they are a board game company, right?
Yeah.
So they see Gen Con as one of the biggest things in their calendar, because it is for a board game company, right? But it's not for competitive tabletop gaming. It's not a big thing. Adepticon is bigger on the
Hmm.
competitive end of things. LVO is significantly bigger on the competitive end of things, even just inside the US. And again, I just feel like the same thing could happen with Essen, that they're like, well, Essen's a major part of our calendar. It's where we do announcements and stuff like that. So obviously, why wouldn't we run our worlds there? And it's like, well, that's not what people go to Essen for.
No.
Not what people want to spend all their time at Essen doing. So yeah, like who, what, where, when. Like honestly, really hoping to hear something else. If we hear something else and we can tell you something else, as respect for the LGT, we will. Otherwise, we're all here guessing and looking for the next bit of information that they give.
Hmm. I was just trying to think of what the equivalent in the UK would be for a games event, specifically like an actual game event, um,
Well, what do you mean?
rather
There's a
than
UK Games Expo.
yeah, no, rather than like the Essen side, but like at a competitive event, right? LGT is probably the largest. Um,
Yeah, I mean, LGT is the largest 40K event in the world.
yeah, is is I'm trying to think. Does Salute, the one in South London, is Salute a show or is that more a competitive event? Because I know that one's pretty big
Bit of
in.
both.
That's more traditional wargamers though,
Yeah,
rather than
it's
like
historical wargaming.
yeah,
It's sales con as much
yeah.
as
That's more like the expos then, isn't it? Really.
yeah.
Yeah. So LGT is probably the equivalent in the UK, unless we get something, and I do think there's probably space for it in the calendar, maybe, but like a massive Birmingham event, like the ones we see for Magic and all the various different card games. The Birmingham Expo for those types of things
Mhm.
is anyone never been to Birmingham or never been to the NEC in Birmingham. It is a a centre that was literally designed for conventions. It is quite literally almost like the perfect space to hold any form of event. It's nuts. Uh, but yeah, so it would be a shame if it's Assassin. But yeah.
And to Paul and others, like who, this has been somewhat followed up of people being like, "Whoa, wait, is this like a mistranslation, or is this an accident, or whatever?" No, like this is intentional. We do like as people have looked it up. They've looked up the German directly. And there are people who are involved in this event who have somewhat
Well,
somewhat confirmed that like this is correct. Like they have been told that
yeah,
this is qualification for something bigger.
yeah. I mean, it's worth remembering Ilya in chat today. Ilya is literally on the team that is hoping to help organise this. And Ilya is German. He does know what he's talking about when it comes to translations. But yeah, it is nuts. Someone also pointed out in chat there, good spot to Chris Baker in chat. Carlo,
Neutral's not a faction.
neutral's not a faction.
Already knew that. Yeah,
Yeah,
already spied the lack of neutrals.
confirmed. This meme has. It feels like this meme has run its course and now has become truth. um, it's we've taken it. We've gone too far.
Martel badge wear.
Martels. They won't be out. When's this? When's this?
In July, actually. It's really soon.
Yeah. Oh Jesus. It is in July. They've only just announced it last week. It's 31st of July, right? 29th to the 31st.
Yep. So, I mean, like 10 weeks.
Yeah, Jesus. Yeah, no, Martels are definitely not going to be out. It's fine that they've not got the Martel badge.
Interesting format. It's a 32-player event with a qualifier for the top 8, which is the next day. Don't like it.
No.
But honestly, I don't know why Simon and Asmodee have such an obsession with this format. Like, it's good.
It's a fetish.
Stupid.
It's definitely a fetish.
It
feels...
absolute fetish. And look, it even says below, like, if the 32 fills up, we'll open up another 32-player tournament on the Friday, which will also qualify for the top 8. Like,
yeah, I mean, that
just
could be...
run a 2-day tournament, guys. Jesus Christ.
That
what
could
are
be
you doing?
Somewhat limited by tour. If they've only got enough space for 32 players, I can understand why they couldn't go beyond that 32 limit, and that having an extra day of gaming is potentially a solution for that. I don't believe that that's ever correct, though. I've never understood. I've talked with Carlo a lot about this behind Tourney grounds and things like this, and not just Carlo, but many others. I've never understood these top cut things. I've never quite understood why he'd have them, but speaking to him, for things like 300 player Magic the Gathering tournaments, it makes a fucking lot of sense. I watch a lot of Magic the Gathering tournaments online, and now I go, yeah, now I know why they need that shit, because you can't filter 1,000 players over the course of 2 days down to one winner without doing that. So, yeah, it's it's understandable for bigger events where the games play out faster as well, but we're just not a fan of it, are we, Carlo? Do you think it's just a UK thing? Do you think it's just in the UK we think everyone should just play games and yeah?
I don't know. I don't know who is a fan of it. Honestly, like Uh,
Well,
I mean, the
you know
US
what's
a little bit seem to have this idea that it's okay, like, but like that's just anecdotal. That's just like they seem to be the only people who defend the format. So maybe it's a Europe US kind of thing, but
I
whatever.
think it might just be again a carryover from other games. The the thing that we've talked about this before actually. Um, the big one for us is that surely the game is a celebration of playing the game as much as it is an event and a tournament. It's about there to come together and enjoy the event and enjoy the game and community and still celebrate the game. And yet these cut to tops don't celebrate the game. They are actively dismissive of players who aren't necessarily the best. Um, and the idea being, oh, but we can run an alternative tournament. No, they don't know if they've got anything running alternatively here, but this idea that you can run an alternative tournament alongside it, that people can play in instead of having to play this other event is like, so you're just saying you guys aren't good enough to play with other people. Play your own thing. That's the way I would look at it personally. Um, it's like, yeah, like getting put in the kiddies pool after doing a couple of laps because it's like you're a bit slow. you know. Um,
Well,
I mean,
some
yeah,
people are.
yeah, fair. um, but yeah,
No, but I
it's
mean, it's quite. It just seems like such a weird concept to me. In that, like, 32 effectively requires 4 5 rounds anyway to get to 32. But like, if you just made it a 64-player tournament, you could resolve it in its entirety over 6 rounds, which is 3 rounds the first day, 3 rounds the second way.
mhm.
That is easily achievable by a 2-day tournament. I don't. Um, everybody. What I find weird is everybody who goes on the Saturday is presumably hoping to get to the Sunday, which means that they have to plan their entire weekend around playing for 2 days. They have to have planned for that. They have to have paid to stay a night for the travel and all these things. Um, and so it's like, why would you then exclude the majority, like 75% of them, from them getting from playing in the tournament on day two? That's what I just don't get. Very, very weird system to it.
See, again, I have no problem with the organisers if they've decided that the 32 limit purely based on the location, like they've only got 16 table space or something like that. Like I can understand that, like that is a limitation that in some cases is difficult to work around. Literal physical space is a premium, and if you haven't got venues that are available, that can be difficult. Um, but yeah, no, I'm not a kind of thing there. So it is true. I mean, yeah. The other thing that gets me a little bit with this is I feel that those type of events or these type of cuts actually work for those uh, going back to it con style tournaments, right? If you're not playing on day two, guess what? You can go and walk around Essen. You can go and walk around Gen Con because you're not playing.
Mm.
But actually, like people went there to play, as you say, and actually Paul says in chat, many players might be out of playing for the big pool. So having a smaller event might suit their needs better. That is true. You can do alternative things that they might find more fun. Um, yeah, uh, but it's still they're still there to play the game. Like they're not gonna go along, then not make the top 8, and then just not play on day two. They'll just play casual games or do other things. I'd have thought. Um, or you're right. You're losing the players to go look down around Gen Con and things like that, which has its pluses, but is not why they came to the event. And yeah, Ilya's saying in chat they have tables for 32 players. Yeah, you can't escape that. If you can't host more than 32, you can't host more than 32. Yeah, and that's just a limit. You can't work around that limit if that's what you've been given at the particular venue or within the event that's being hosted. Um, Yeah, and Asmodee are hosting lots and lots of side events. Do we know what kind of side events? Any question for you?
Presumably for all the other games, right?
I've like
If this is an
Legion
Asmodee
demos
run
and things
event,
like that.
interesting actually that this is. What's super interesting is this is an Asmodee run event with Legion, Armada, X-Wing, of which Asmodee don't own those games anymore, right? Not that Asmodee owns A Song of Ice and Fire. It's just the
Um,
distributor for. But like
they
all of those have been moved into AMG, right?
they definitely
Quite
distribute Legion still, right? They're still the main distributors for Legion.
yeah, they're the distributors, but they're not
Are
the
they
creators
distributors
of
for
it
Armada
anymore.
and X-Wing still? Yeah. No,
No,
but
I
they're not
believe
the.
so. I believe that all the Star Wars rights have been moved over to AMG.
Yeah. In which case, they might be just doing it because they're the distributor. They might be just running the events on behalf of. It's worth remembering, and this is actually quite important for people who aren't aware. Asmodee have divisions in different countries, and it does seem from the outside, Ilya is actually a very good person to talk to about this. It very much does seem that the different divisions are not similarly responsible in the different countries for the various different aspects of the game. So,
Mm.
like Asmodee UK is actually relatively responsible for A Song of Ice and Fire in the UK, but they just don't give a shit. Um, Whereas Asmodee US are literally independent from CMON in the way that they run the game. Like CMON does all the running of the game in the US, whereas there isn't a CMON UK division at all. Asmodee UK run it all. I imagine the same is France and Germany as well, where it's actually Asmodee who do the running of the events and stuff instead of CMON. MG is a daughter of Asmodee, not kind of maybe.
Mm.
It bought right. They own it, I think. I
Yeah,
think the
true.
rights
I mean, like
belong
Asmodee,
to them,
yeah,
but
it's right. It's right. Asmodee, if Asmodee chose to move all those games from Fantasy Flight games, right? Fantasy
yeah,
Flight games is the ones who don't technically run it anymore. I mean, I
yeah.
did sort of like misspeak when I said that, like Asmodee don't run it anymore. But yeah, it is right that Asmodee own it, AMG, and they own Fantasy Flight. So yeah, it's not a Fantasy Flight tournament anymore. So I guess, yeah, I mean, sure. Sure. Asmodee are murky and opaque, and who knows what they are.
um, yeah. I mean, it is what it is. Do you know what I like though? There's actually some good news behind this, after all, right? And those of you who that are paying attention and looking on the screen or have looked on the site already, it is actually being run through stats.
Mhm.
And Ilya's spoken to me a couple of times about little different things, and probably spoken to Carlo on and off about it as well. No, yeah, he will do, because he asked me a question last night, and I said that's a question for Carlo. Um, so yeah, hopefully that'll get sorted soon. But it's yeah, they're running through the stat site, which
Yeah.
means that we are going to see effectively Asmodee somewhat indirectly supporting the stat site at the event, which is
Asmodee, yeah.
yeah,
I mean, like
yeah.
we'll
I mean,
believe it when Simon do it, but
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's it's not a huge thing, but it's a step in the right direction for the site. And you know, in the nicest
yeah,
possible
you know,
sense,
great.
in my head, it's good for the game because it's again that transparency that we've asked for multiple times is just there. There's no, you can't lie. That's just what happened at the event. The narrative is there. If you want to read it, you can go and ask the people the right questions. There's none of this. I turned up and there was one person, and then we just swept the event under the rug and pretend it didn't happen. Because that happens. um, Brian says it well in chat. Song of Ice and Fire Life is so much better with stats.
I mean, there are events that run on stats that get one entrant and
Oh yeah,
get swept under the rug.
Yeah, there are.
I sweep them under the rug. I go and look, and if you haven't closed the event and it's got one entrant, I just delete the tournament.
Yeah, but I have a feeling, because it is an open piece of information, people can literally look at that and go, well, that event didn't run. But like you don't have events that run like that. That's what I mean. It's hard to explain what I meant, but yeah. Everything else is pretty standard. I did read through this the other day when it came out. There is nothing here that is out of order. There's nothing here that I kind of looked at and went, what the fuck? It's all just very standard, very straightforward, nothing weird rules. They did make the interesting decision, which I essentially do agree with, that the PDF takes precedent over War Council. In the case of piss poor management of Simon. But yeah.
And yeah, I mean, Ilya's right. Yeah. As in,
it's not official support.
you definitely said something along the lines of Asmodee support. I said, let's at least see if Simon even want to recognize it. But no, I mean, like, I actually, this is, forget the word official support, forget the word anything like that, right? Like, that they posted a link on Asmodee is a monumental step forward over some of the interactions that's been had between myself and Simon in the past, where they have actively endorsed everybody involved in something except me. So, it's a step forward.
It is. And actually, I mean, what's actually super interesting, Ilya saying that, like, Asmodee basically saw it fit to use whatever tool they saw fit. That in itself, in my opinion, is a good precedent to have from an organizational standpoint. They don't know, Asmodee, let's be brutally honest, Asmodee probably don't know stats exists, or they're not aware, right? So if they're just willing to say, can we use this site, or can we use a community tool to run the event, and they go, yeah, sure, go for it. Like, that enough is actually them saying that's fine. Whereas some, not like Simon have ever actually done it, but Simon don't actually say yes, do it, whatever. They literally just don't interact with that statement, which is a bit different.
Paul asks how long till I sell the site to Simon and retire as a millionaire. How do you know I'm not already a millionaire, Paul?
Those are the real questions. It's actually super funny because I know Carlo's not a millionaire, so mainly because he would have already retired.
Absolutely.
How many more years is it? Is it 3 more years? He retired.
It's supposed to be 1.
1. Oh shit! Got the year. That ain't happening.
Simon.
Knock. Oh dear. Brian only saying that Balls and Swords had a 10-man event yesterday that wasn't on stats and took it with 3 wins for Mance and his Mammoth. Yeah, unfortunately, Brian, it wasn't on stats, so the event didn't happen. You may have been there.
I mean, I believe it did happen, and I've heard a number of people had a hissy fit there. So, like,
yeah. So,
I mean,
this is a bit off topic. Some of the patrons were at the event. So Panzer Harris and the Tane, I believe, were there. I think the Tane was there. I think he was, right? I think he was.
I think so.
Yeah. But yeah, they're patrons on Song of Ice and Fire stats. And he basically he just randomly dropped a thing in there after we'd been chatting, and he was like, "So yeah, 2 local players have separate tantrums and storm out," which I've literally never seen that happen. I've never seen a Song of Ice and Fire player get angry to the point of not playing. I've seen people get frustrated with a ruling or a little bit frustrated with a dice roll and things like that, but like quite literally be like, "Nah, I'm done." I've never seen that.
I've seen people quit a game effectively, right?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
resign a game which they were already going to lose.
Yeah.
They might not have like necessarily been crushed, but like they were going to lose by a point or two, and then a rules interaction comes up, or like something happens, or like there's some kind of argument with their opponent. A rule goes not their way. They have to get a third party involved, and third party's like, no, that's not how it works. You know, you're wrong. And they're like, oh, that's like ruined my whole game. I quit. Do you know what I mean? But like they quit like the game. I've never seen somebody quit the event. So
Yeah. And even people quitting the game is rare, right? It doesn't
yeah, I mean
happen often.
that's still rare. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
I mean, as much as some of me's like, I really want to know the dirt on how that went down, and oh, gossip, gossip, gossip. You know, I also kind of want to go, all right, fair enough, move on. um,
yeah, yeah. I think
what?
Brian says weird events. Steve got most sporting.
After making
Yeah,
something out of
no,
a
I
tantrum.
think that it's quite interesting in that like I think the UK competitive community is getting pretty closely knit in terms of like you can reckon like there is maybe at most like a third or a half of each tournament are people that you've not seen before. You know that who don't travel to further events.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of people at events that I see, that I meet, they're at every other event. They're not everyone, but you know, I've seen them before. I know their names. I know their faces. I know their stats names. And the thing is, that's really important about that is that people have to hold themselves to a higher standard because they're gonna be seen again. Like
Mm.
you know, you can't. If you rage quit, people are gonna talk about it. Do you know what I mean? And like,
Yeah.
and people will know you by reputation as like not an enjoyable player to play against, and these kind of things. And I think that that closeness means that people just you know they don't act like that. They act in a very good manner, and not that that's specifically unique to the UK, but it can be different online, right? Like even though the online community is not huge and nearly everybody online does know each other, it's when somebody who's like new to the community in that way. Maybe these players are like local players who don't interact with the community at large and stuff like that, and then they come in and then they're like just shocked by something, right? They're shocked by the way rules are played. They're shocked by something that's going on,
Hmm.
and that if they don't have that belief that the way they act matters to people, then that like social contract is all just breaks down, and I think that that's unfortunate. Like, I think it's really, really unfortunate when people aren't involved in the community
Hmm.
in that kind of way.
But I think, I mean, just looking, I've just gone to War of the Wall, for example, which is coming up this weekend, right? Okay, this is an event technically hosted by yourself, Carlo, you know, at our local kind of games club. So yes, I'm more likely to know the local players at this event. Um, but like the dead meta guys are the dead meta guys. Like James Richard is probably the only one that I've not had much interaction of the dead meta guys, but all of the rest of
Mm.
them I know, like Harbo, Lee, obviously Alan and Shane, uh, and so like I know them. There's obviously Hilo, Duggars. Then you've got the NRG guys. Obviously, Tim Whitney's coming up. If anyone who doesn't know Tim Whitney, you're not a UK player if you don't know Tim Whitney. He does painting. I say painting. It's not really painting. You should really call it like works of
Art.
art.
He does art.
Yeah, art on models. Yeah. Paul Whitehead, who is a relatively unknown player up until late, but has been attending a lot of events. You know, he's one of the Leiders Legion guys from Leeds, and has really kicked the community off there. So he's a relatively prominent member in the Leeds community, and is now travelling to events. Um, you know, all of these players, there is literally not a player at the event who I don't know, and I'm on relatively first-hand name terms with. Now, okay, yes, that's a local event for us, but vast majority of the people coming to the event will probably know the vast majority of the others coming. They just won't know the likes of we've got a local guy called Chris who doesn't play in events that often. He only plays in things that we do, so they won't know him. They won't know John. If John's playing, can't remember if John's playing. So they're less likely, to know those players, but they're the local players. They're the players who don't travel.
Mm-hmm.
So it's reasonable there's a couple, but yeah, the vast majority of the competitive scene is very, even if it's not close knit, they all know each other.
So I think that obviously there are local players to our club who don't travel to events. That's not obviously like some clubs. Everybody will travel, but most clubs
Yeah.
there'll be some who do and some who don't. But even that, somebody from a club means that you have a connection to the community. If some
Yes.
of your players travel to events, if some of your players are known, even if they're just known on TTS, some of them are just active in the community. And what I've always found weird about Boards and Swords is unless I'm wrong, and there are people that I just don't know who are in and around, Boards and Swords have always had events. Before COVID, they were one of the biggest places running events because they're central to the UK. It's quite easy for them to draw a bigger crowd than somewhere up north like we are, or somewhere far down south. They kind of lose out on the willingness of people to travel that far. But when you talk about people that I've maybe never met at Just Play, or never met at Chelmsford Bunker, or never met at Leonidas Legion, that I've met somebody from that club means that there's a chance that there's some kind of common ground there, that there's some kind of knowledge that we will play the game to a certain standard. What's weird about Boards and Swords is there is nobody in that store, despite its past strength and its past role in the community, that seems to be active in the community as a whole, which I've always found very strange. It's interesting because I have no idea how, and forget stats, I'm talking about the Discord community, or the community around the UK or the European community. I have no idea how you're supposed to reach these players and integrate them into the community and help to grow the game in that kind of way, because you can consider two types of growth, right? You can consider the game in terms of our club could bring in 3 new people, 4 new people, whatever. It could double in size even. But it's not brought that many people in. But if you can bring a whole nother club into the sphere of the game, then that's what really helps to grow it and helps to push it forward. If you can make them aware of the larger kind of active community going on, that's how it will stay active and stay growing.
Well, I
But
mean,
I have no idea how you're supposed to reach out to these people, what would make them want to interact. And
that's
it's an interesting thought, because to me, I never really interacted with any community in the past before A Song of Ice and Fire. I played 40k for many, many years, Warhammer Fantasy, many, many years, all sorts of Warhammer games, non-Games Workshop games. Never once did I bother to become active in those communities. It just didn't interest me. I just played the games at my own club. And inevitably, it always led to me getting bored of the game and the people that I get to play against and leaving.
what's actually super interesting is that this is exactly, the almost like the weird discussion and the weird way that we got into A Song of Ice and Fire as big as we did, after the initial hype in our club, right? It was it was NRG specifically meeting Daryl and Scott, and them actually wanting to run events in the Northeast. And it was like, yeah, we can run an event in Durham. That's cool. We'll do that. You can come along and try this thing out. And we met them that way, and we did other things, of course, with them as well. But that was through you going to another local play area, right? And they just happened to be there playing the game, and it was like, oh right, cool. Met people that way, and then the DMG guys we met kind of almost randomly again through NRG, but the DMG guys ended up creating, through Aaron and at the time Bruce, doing their own stuff on YouTube, and it was like, oh look, there's some more Assault Ice and Fire players who are kind of just down the road, really, in the grand scheme of things. And as a result, I'm not going to sit here and say that we're super close to the DMG guys, but like it's got to the point now where we're going to events, we'll have banter with them all the time because they are, the closest club to us basically. And they have a lot of members and they're growing constantly. And that's effectively like what was us, then the guys up at Northern Realms, then became Durham War Games, Northern Realms, and then DMG. And it's like we doubled in size, and then we doubled in size again in terms of our communities, and then obviously the online and everything blew that out of the water. But the point still remains: it was those communities joining together that is what made us actually have significant growth. Whereas the player base, if we think about it, Carlo, we've had 3 new players, 4 if you count like Philip and Amy, I guess, maybe 5, join the game since we started. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In our actual local area. So yeah, I do think it's a big thing. What's actually more frustrating, and the bit that I don't really understand, and this is specifically with Boards and Swords, is Boards and Swords actually one of the main guys there. It's Rob. Seems like a nice guy. Has run events on Stats before. Has run a Song of Ice and Fire events, and even did a Song of Ice and Fire digital events during the COVID lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
Like he is aware, although he's a store owner, he's not going to be super integrated. There are players in those communities that are very much aware of the wider community, but I also get the impression that what they've actually done at the store is a really good thing. I think it's a really, really good thing. They have generated a local community that plays games together. And Boards and Swords becomes the conduit of what game are we playing this week, rather than what community are we actually invested in. And that's that's a little bit unfair because the likes of Chris F&M, I know he's quite a relatively big player at Boards and Swords. He goes a lot, I believe, and he's very active in the community.
Oh,
I believe, yeah.
Okay.
I
So
believe. I
mean,
believe.
I had
Chris.
no idea that Chris F&M was from Boards and Swords.
Yeah, well, I don't know if he. I
I'm
don't know if he
obviously
works
very
there,
aware of
but I know he
his
goes to the store
involvement
a
in the
lot.
community and
Yeah.
his models and work.
Yeah.
I had no.
I believe
I
anyway.
did often wonder where the hell Chris F&M was from.
That's Chris Baker. I do believe. Might be. He might be. I might be wrong. Feel free to correct me, Chris. But I do believe that he's based in that area at least. So it might be his local store. I don't know. Yeah. Weird one.
But interesting. I mean, if I'm getting it right from Brian, it was only a 10-player event though.
Yep.
And we can name a number of people. Brian, Steve, I think Paul Aiden was possibly
Guessing,
there.
yeah.
Some players from Daventry, the people who ran Panzer Harris, and I believe he went with somebody else, but maybe I'm just getting that wrong. That's 5 players from the known community, which means, well, that's only 5 left from what seems like the local community.
Yeah.
So that's definitely not what it used to be, or their events aren't being as widely advertised and aren't being as widely attended as they used to be. The first event that I went to at Boards and Swords was a 30-player event.
Mm-hmm. Cole went, not Paul. And Chris is from Sheffield. No, so I'm clearly quite wrong. I know you go to the Boards and Swords place events quite a lot. 2 of the 3 world tournaments I've done. Yeah. So yeah, he just happens to go to the ones in or the ones hosted by them quite often. Yeah, no, it's a weird one. It's a very weird one.
I mean, it's interesting. I honestly didn't know the event was running. I had heard mention of some people that they were going to Boards and Swords. I didn't know what weekend it was on or when it was. Or is Duncan Rhodes a Boards and Swords member? Don't know.
Maybe. Doesn't Duncan currently lives in Scotland though, right?
No, I don't believe so.
Maybe not. I don't know. I always thought he did for some reason. I don't know. I don't know. I'd have to
Let's
look
move
that
on.
up. Yeah, move that on. It would be a weird stalking moment for Duncan Rhodes, being like, "Ooh, where does he live?" No. Right. Anyway,
There's a
we've.
very active US map.
It is a very
They,
active US map.
I
You're
feel like
impressed?
it's a lot less east west coast centric than it has been in the past.
It's a bit
That's a
sporadic.
lot. Yeah, which is great. Haven't seen that much use down, in the more southern central US states. I don't even know what do the Americans call, that whole southeast kind of region.
Southeast,
Do they call it southeast?
as in like towards Florida and stuff.
Yeah, but not quite the actual Florida peninsula, like the
So
the bit.
like
Yeah,
this
whatever.
is Missouri, LA, like
Yeah,
this bit.
Tennessee, Atlanta. What's that? What's all Georgia? What's all this called?
The 13 colonies, isn't it? No, the Gulf Coast. The southeast is the Gulf Coast, so this is all the Gulf Coast, which makes a lot of sense because it's on the Gulf of Mexico. Um, and then is it like I obviously call it East Coast, but like it's the Atlantic seaboard, isn't it?
Yeah, the
Basically.
south is the southeast because the west is the whole of the west coast and the deep south. There you
Yeah,
go.
yeah,
Cool.
deep south maybe. It's the South.
Today I learned.
So Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. Yeah. So this is this is actually, if you think about it, when someone says the South, this is where you think of, isn't it? You do think like New Orleans, Texas, to some extent.
Yeah, it's great. Really good to see.
Yeah, no, it's really good. It would be. I mean, what I always find is interesting is we have quite a few things kind of crop up in New York, but I was surprised at how little between New York and like kind of the South Carolina, Georgia area we get. We get nothing here. I don't think I've ever seen an event in Washington or like around Philly and things like that.
Nope.
No.
Never heard of anything around Raleigh or Charlotte or anything like
Yeah. James.
that. No, James.
There are many players who I'm sure could disagree with that. The Carolinas, yeah, the Carolinas. Oh dear, that's very much an
Yeah, we'll try not to piss off any more Americans than usual.
yeah. I mean, can I say I'll make some American friends, right, and piss off everyone else in the world. Isn't this just a North America bit? Isn't this just America? Isn't this just the US?
Well, you were correct up until you said US.
That's why I had to keep on, yeah, just, oh, yeah, 100%. Tara lives at next to Philly. As in, like, next door neighbors to Philly. Fair enough, Tara. You have to go to Mythicos. Holy shit, really? Wow. So Philly going to New Jersey just
That's
to play
sad.
games. Yeah. How has Philadelphia not got a games club that plays the Song of Ice and Fire? That's nuts. I mean, well, anyway, we've gone down a rabbit hole there that I did not mean to go down. So we are going to look at events.
There are also, since we're looking at the map, there are also a couple of events which I'm not sure if they're trolls or not. I haven't quite looked at them. There's one down in Mauritius next to Madagascar.
At Reunion.
I think that's not really happening. There's one in middle of the Med. I'm not even sure what island. Is that Ibiza?
No, it's Palma.
Palma.
Yeah.
Is that one
Ibiza.
real, do we think? Could be.
You know what? I'm going to say yes.
We had those events in Malta for a while. I think the Malta community seems to have moved away from the game. They seem to have like a real flash in the pan. It's quite interesting, actually. They came in. They're really interested in like the TCS scene. They're really interested in pushing the game forward in terms of like its professionalism, right? Like they ran a TTS event with prize money. They like put the prize money in. It was free to enter. There was all sorts of stuff going on. They really wanted it to be much more competitive, much more on the scale of what like Games Workshop games can achieve. And then when like the game wasn't ready for it effectively, I feel like they moved away from the game. Like they just moved on to a different game. But there was a store there called Gold on Dice. Anybody who's been here for long enough will recognize that name. Yeah, I think it's sad that maybe the game or the community or like whatever wasn't ready for it, and that those guys felt they didn't get enough back, and so moved on to a different game, I think.
It's interesting because it's made me think about them as a place. So they hosted their annual, yearly A Song of Ice and Fire tournament in September of last year. I don't know if that's something that we were aware of at the time. I feel like we may have been. But that did run in September. September last year, they had a Song of Ice and Fire event. I don't. It looks familiar. There's some guys drinking outside, like drinking beer outside, and it looking sunny. I do vaguely remember pictures like that.
But actually, it's also possible, Tara, that that the distribution, which also may be particularly bad to get it to Malta.
Well, I mean, it's also worth noting. I mean, this is actually quite interesting. Gold on Dice Events hasn't even put a post up since September 2021. So that's the events that they're running. So it might be that the player who ran the events has backed out of the game or is not as into the game as he was. That's on their Facebook page. I'll have a little look. See if I can get anything back on that. And you know what? I might even drop a couple of messages over to see if it's still going. Because if it is still going, it'd be nice to hear from them. Seeing what they're up to. Yeah. Was it Malta that really strict COVID regulations? Probably. I mean,
possibly. Because
the UK/Europe, we've had some really dumb COVID regulations at points. There was a point where Italy, you weren't allowed out of your house basically at all. Whereas I know we had this thing where you shouldn't really go outside, but everyone did anyway for walks and stuff. Whereas Italy went like full lockdown, didn't they, at parts in northern Italy, I believe.
Well, I mean, Italy was the first place to get it in Europe.
Yeah, but they had the second wave one, they had like full on COVID lockdown, didn't they? Proper like curfews and stuff. But yeah, no. Find out more about that. I will ask a couple of questions, see where that leads to. But yeah, so what we were actually going to talk about, eventually got there, is World of Champions. Yeah? There's some big events that have won. Now, we're going to go look at 3 events in my head. Not 3 events in my head. Don't look at events that go on in my head. That would be a mistake. We're going to look at Welcome to 2022, look at the stats from that. We're going to look at the ongoing Invitational, which we wanted to talk about. And what was the other one that we were going to mention? I forgot.
Probably some other tournament that you're doing well in, Mickey, yeah?
No. It's got nothing to do with me doing well. It's purely because these are ones...
Mickey just wants to point out that Mickey won a tournament. Mickey is still in a tournament. And there's this other event that I'm going to. Well, maybe you'll think of it.
Where is it, this one? That was the 30... No, we looked at that last week. That was the 30-point... That was the 30-point starter box event. Was there anything you wanted to mention of that? We looked at that a bit last week.
No.
Did you look at the results?
Yeah, I did. Starks went undefeated across 3 players, right? If I'm right.
Great John.
Yeah.
Just killed everyone.
Only Starks. The Starks only lost to Starks.
Yeah.
And Starks came 1, 2, and 4 or something like that.
Yeah, I think
If
it
I
ended up.
remember rightly.
Yeah, 1, 2, and 6 by tiebreakers.
6, but yeah, like the Stark loss is in a Stark mirror. Yeah, like not what I would have put my money on. I don't think. But yeah, particularly maybe not Great John. I would have thought that like Grey Wind and his activation would be useful, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, Dan, unfortunately, he's now been upgraded to Little Mickey 1 Cup.
Mm-hmm. I mentioned that last week, though. I just mentioned that event was over. It's not about looking at what won, it's about looking at what did well, right? Because that is the largest event we've had on the site for a while at 44 players. So if anything is indicative of what is going well in the meta and where the meta is leading us to, that event is probably the biggest tell. That doesn't mean it's the best, of course. The whole point of the ELO rankings is exactly for that. But it's certainly a good and interesting place to look at for meta discussion being the biggest event. So in terms of the stats, what's actually super interesting is Targaryen actually topped the event with the highest number of wins. Now, for what little it's worth, Free Folk and Starks specifically, those two factions, because of the double final that needed to happen, they actually have one more game than any of the other factions had access to. But even then, 60% Free Folk is very good across not just myself playing it, other players playing it in the event too, which is pretty good. Baratheon and neutrals just.
Yeah, not sure about that Barra, but I mean, Barra Lannisters and neutrals all do so badly that they allow everybody out of Stark, Greyjoy, Night's Watch, Free Folk, and Targs to all have like positive win rates, all be significantly above 50%, and all just be grouped together as like, well, these factions have done very well. I don't think that there's a clear standout there, and I think that that's very indicative of the meta. Interesting that Barras didn't do that well in the event.
Yeah, that's actually the standout, if anything, is that Barras were way lower than we'd have thought they'd be, given their.
Yeah, like people have been saying that they are the new Terror or something, and that low activation Barra is still some kind of meta breaker, real big changer. I am still of the opinion that a higher quality opponent who understands activation control better, that a low activation barras aren't a thing, aren't a problem.
Yeah.
Like I've played low activation barra now. Admittedly, is against a less experienced player. It's against a player who I would expect to win with in most matchups. I have lost to him before. He's not trash player at all, right? But I would expect to win. But the low activation Barra, it did scare me a little bit because it is so strong. Like like the actual units, the reality of them, they are so powerful that like things definitely could go wrong for me. Like I might be like, right, yeah, I could get a kill here, and then just like got 0 wounds, right? Because they just like 2-up save everything or whatever goes on. But the reality of it for me is that it doesn't win repeatedly if your opponent understands how to play the mission around it, how to minimize its strengths. That's my opinion, though. Like if in any one game I saw somebody playing low activation barras against me, I would not feel comfortable.
No.
But I also personally would never take it to an event because I do not think that it can win 4 or 5 games in a row against good opponents.
I think the telling sign for me was the way we have a guy, Phil. He's relatively new to the game in our club, and he played effectively a low activation barra list. Massive fan of Champions of the Stag, and I saw him playing against Dan. This is a couple of weeks back, and our Dan, who we play with a lot, Dan lost to it. But the thing that, I don't sit there and say, "Oh, Dan, that was shit," or he made mistakes or anything. I just looked at it and went, like,
Well, you do, because Dan's here in the chat, and his tagline for you is, "Mickey, let me tell you why you lost."
No.
That is Mickey's big thing at the club,
Oh.
particularly recently. He loves to tell you why you just lost to him.
Jesus, that's clearly how it comes across, not as how it's intended at all. The big thing for me was when I watched it happen. I looked at Dan's list and I kind of went, I don't know what he's supposed to do. Like, that was actually the
I
thing.
mean, like it is in essence a low activation barrel list is in essence a skew list. It is skew. It is armor skew. It is, do you have precision? Do you have ways to get through? Are you running
scorpions?
Are you running remote damage? Are you running auto wounds? Are you running some kind of panic? The thing is I think that there are lots of ways around it, and even if you're running none of those things, if you're running some kind of like cheap spam, you can also just win by objectives.
Yes.
So I think that it has a lot of counters, but it is in essence a hard skew list.
Mm. Yeah, I do agree.
And in the same way that, like, if you bring a panic list and your opponent's gone hard anti-panic skew, then you can be in for a bad time. Thing is like, people haven't and aren't bringing like anti-armor, and so if they bring armor skew, lots of people can have a bad time because they still see fighting as the only way to win the game. And heavy armor, low activation barras still lean heavily onto the fighting side of the game, so heavily so that even though winning by objectives is nowhere near as easy as it used to be, it's nowhere near as big a problem for the barras, it's still definitely achievable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely one of those which I think maybe has seen its limelight. People weren't ready, and it took people by surprise, and now people go, "Oh well, that's not that too bad." Cole says, "What is skew?" Do you want to take it?
Sure. Skew is like if I basically decide that there's one part of the game where I'm going to beat you in, or that would be one way to think of it. Or actually, more specifically in my mind, it's one part of the game where I'm going to make any points you've spent on that worthless. So, for me, the oldest and original skew was one of the hardest skews that ever existed in the game. Was the 1.6 Poor Fellow spam, right? And this is a skew list because it has almost no armor, which interestingly is a skew, and it has amazing morale. What this is skewing is if you spent any points on something like Sundering, that's worthless because I only have a 6+ save. So any Sundering that you have is a worthless stat. Any precision that you have is basically a worthless stat. And because I have such good morale, basically any anti-morale that you have, vicious is almost worthless. Intimidating presence, not exactly worthless, not in the same way that having a 6-up armor makes Sundering absolutely worthless. Vicious still has an effect, but the effect will be a lot smaller when I have like a 2+, 3+ morale. Still incredibly unlikely to get me to fail my morale. So skew, more specifically, isn't that I'm leaning into one thing very heavily. For me, in my mind, skew is when I make something of yours worthless because I don't give you a single good target to attack with it.
Mm-hmm.
In the modern day, there is still some skew, but like morale skew definitely still exists, and by that I mean like armies that just generally have a very strong morale. So there's nothing out there for you to like utilize your vicious on, utilize your good panic tests on. That's a big problem for a faction like Lannisters, who have a lot of their points, a lot of their core deck, a lot of their mechanics and their identity, and their just like battle plan built into getting you to fail panic tests.
Mhm.
If everything I do has amazing morale, if I'm playing Night's Watch and I have Embolden, or, I'm running Mance Free Folk, and so I'm able to put out a 5+ bubble. Effectively, you've got tons of wasted points. Armor skew says I have a 2+3+ wall of armor here. Interestingly, it almost makes panic-based damage not worth as much. Maybe.
Yeah,
Big if the armor can stop you from taking any damage at all.
Yeah.
The armor stops them from taking any damage, then panic never happens. Or effectively, what it really skews against is things that want to kill stuff quickly, things that want to one-shot, anything that somebody's invested in as being like highly mobile and highly aggressive is really shut down by something which is incredibly tanky. I still don't think it's the best skew out there. I still personally would heavily lean into morale skew continuously and no other type of skew, because I still just think that there are so many armies live and die by their panic tests, and
I
not
mean,
that many armies that live and die by the physical damage that they do.
I think that's actually the most interesting thing for me, because as you say, like neutrals and Lannisters, who are arguably the two worst factions in the game right now, or one worst faction and one ragtag group of people, they are panic based completely, and they get completely neutered. The big thing there, Lannister's thing is actually not so much generating big panic bombs so much as lots of panic bombs. Like, I like to think of Lannister as a bit of like a cluster missile rather than an ICBM or something like that. Whereas actually, because everyone's got good morale, the cluster missile, most of it just bounces off, so it's useless. And then you get one through and go, haha, I did 4 wounds. But then other factions go, yeah, but I've just got an ICBM. I'll just nuke you for 6. Done. Like, that's just better. So it's like that style of stuff for Lancer neutrals really sucks. Interestingly, Starks, who came out of the gates in the season 1 patch as one of the most popular factions and most played, what do they rely on? Crit blow and rolling lots of dice. And strangely enough, what counters that style? Baratheons with high armor. So I do think that the Baratheon rise is also somewhat to do with the Stark resurgence, if you will.
And Lance as well. The Tully Cavaliers are Stark.
But
Lannisters are leaning more heavily on Knights of Castle Rock, but nowhere near what people said that they were going to. Right?
yeah.
Like, still, people are more favoring Flayed Men than they are like Knights of Castle Rock in general. I've seen a fair few Lannister armies which run one of each. I've seen more Lannister armies that run 2 Flayed Men than run 2 Knights of Castle Rock. And that doesn't mean that the Knights of Castle Rock are in a really, really bad place or anything like that. I do think that they're fine, but the point is that the game has naturally adapted to Lance like quite quickly. Lance isn't running around one-shotting everything everywhere, even with Great John, that combo, which me and you both said, surely this is busted. Surely this is going to completely destroy any value in having defense. Has not come to fruition because a unit which has so much defense, like Champions of the Stag, is not one-shottable even by Lance, where you sacrifice another 4 wounds on top.
Not realistically. It's just the odds are definitely not in your favor. So, yeah.
And then the Champions of the Stag are getting their full value. They're getting everything. They're using their survivability. They use their grind. They get engaged, and they get to just lock up that Lance cavalry and win over the long term. And yeah, like I think that it's a very interesting place for the game to be. I don't think that there's anything. I don't think that there's any particular style which is hyper dominant. I don't think that there's any faction which is dominant. I think that there's enough scary things out there with morale that I personally want to lean towards playing as good morale as possible continuously. Like if I can pick a unit which has like 4+, 6+, or a unit that has a 3+, 7+, I'm taking the 4+, 6+ every time.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can bring that down to a 5, if I can give it Iron Resolve, then I'm going to, right? Because I think that is where the game's defensive stats are useful right now.
Yeah.
And so, like there is still that lean, but people are clearly doing well with Barras at times, and their high armor is useful for people. I think that it also does very, very well into Ranger Hunters, right? Like Ranger Hunters who throw volume dice, like really absolute volume dice, and they can chew through cheap stuff, right? Which has always previously been the nightmare of the game. Cheap infantry at 4 points, 12 wounds. If they can back that up with good morale, call that Mance, call that Poor Fellows, call that Trappers, whatever it is, if they can back up having 12 wounds, being cheap, and having good morale, then the only thing that really managed to get value out of that was Ranger Hunters or something else that can like do this bouncing double tap. You could maybe say Targaryen veterans, but like like not like really dominating them. And I think that is hard countered by heavy armor as well, because the volume dice with no real significant keywords really struggles against like a 2+ armor, even a 3+ armor. If it can get the flank, things start to get better, but that's not always possible. And I think that's super, super, super interesting that we have these spam armies going on. We have these relatively elite Night's Watch armies going on. People would have seen that I've played a few games against Elite Teddy recently, and he's also got a blog going on. He's talking a lot about his own like re-exploration of proper competitive song. Like properly thinking about the game in terms of like, I want to win really high-end tournaments. I want to be one of the best players in the world again, which takes like a real step more dedication than being just playing games, right? Like you have to really analyze why you are winning or losing. And he has settled on Night's Watch effectively, and he has been a big user of Ranger Hunters. We played a couple of games which involved like mirror Ranger Hunters. Even crazily enough, I still think it's one of the best abilities in the game, and I still rely on it. I think that maybe even something like Relentless is possibly even in a good place. Maybe right now. I still think that it's quite strong. I still think that the Night's Watch Captain particularly is very strong, because boldness and courage is a very, very powerful ability. But even when we think about the interaction between an extra activation versus having more wounds on the table versus being able to put down another combat drop, playing a real traditional 5-3 versus playing like a 4-2, which has 2 more activations on the table through Watch Captain, versus the use of solos, all these things, I don't see any standout. I still favor the high activation count. I still favor getting as high as possible all the time, personally. But I don't think that there's any real standout that is like, you must use this, otherwise you will lose.
Yeah, no, definitely. Oh, cool. Huh. We'll go through this in a second. But yeah, I'm general of the agreement there. In terms of activations, I do think Relentless is still very good. I do think it's one of the better abilities out there in the game. But I am of the opinion that I do agree with you that the loss, if you will, to take Relentless is offset by the kind of gains that it gives your opponent. If you I know what I mean. It's hard. You explained it much
Well, I
better.
mean,
The
for 10 points, a Night's
deployment thing is
Watch,
a massive thing.
for
Like
10 points, Night's Watch can bring any one of its main staple 7-point units with an extra activation and boldness and courage, right? Again, this is very, very important. Boldness and courage is a very, very good ability. But even though they bring 2 activations and very powerful attacks and also very high action economy on top of that, they can double tap, they can do all these different things. They only get to deploy 1 unit.
Yep.
And they only bring 12 wounds.
Yep.
And they are hugely more offset right now than they were in the past. In the past, I was just like, does not matter at all. Activations are the only thing that matters. But because they've managed to make middling units more viable, and because they've managed to reduce the effectiveness of some of the cheaper units, overall, I think that sheer wounds on the table is becoming more viable.
the big thing for me, deployment, but also actually the way that Relentless works now, and not changed Relentless, but the kind of lists that it's being faced into nowadays, it feels that the decision on when to use Relentless is a lot more difficult. And that is for me the critical thing. Like, certainly one of the things I've started to notice is players have to be very careful when they choose to activate versus when they choose to Relentless. Because if they get the order wrong, they put themselves onto a line where they can't use the Relentless. Well, great, you've just knocked them down activation. Or they put themselves onto a line where their activation ends up being relatively unimpactful, or their Relentless ends up being unimpactful because they want to do a late round charge. That in itself can be punishable because you can then go, right, well, I'm just going to move that unit away that you wanted to charge. Now you just can't do it, or now you're not going to get the position you wanted, or even I'm just going to charge you first because you've come that little bit closer.
I do think the removal of the ranged attack from the Relentless has made it way, way, way more complicated to use well. Right? Like, it was such an easy action to take. Because, I mean, early in the round, if we haven't engaged yet, if there's nothing important to do, activating your archers and attacking is just the go-to thing. Yeah, it's just, hey, well, I'll just waste some time because this won't commit me to anything unless what I'm hoping to do is like retreat when I get attacked or something, right? But even in that case, when I could have used Relentless to shoot, I can still do something else with the unit, right? So just using it as a delay, which has an attack as well, was very, very powerful and very useful. Whereas now you're having to use it to set yourself up for something worthwhile, and it's not always easy to achieve. Unless, interestingly, like if you out activate by 2, then it becomes way more easy to achieve something with it. It being the one activation you have over your opponent can make it really complex to use. So I haven't actually looked. I'd be interested to know what the numbers of like the super low activation count versus the super high activation count is. I think that loads of different styles are viable right now, and that's brilliant. That's really brilliant for the game.
Yeah, definitely. The only other thing I was going to say, in kind of like relation to that, in terms of games and in terms of like in where we're at with it, I'll go back to the stats for a second. Is we have talked about it before. Now you can't quite see it. Move it up here. It's the prominence of certain things, and we're always going to see good commanders in the game. We're always going to see things that stand out. Saying that there's that a faction doesn't have a best commander would just be lying. There will always be a best, or at least even if they're not standout. But there are, of course, 3 to some extent that I think are problematic. There is a 4th, but we'll come back onto him in a minute. But that's Drogo, Eddard, and Mance. Eddard is by far Like, interestingly, Eddard and Mance in this particular event, they both have exactly the same win rate. And, you know, Eddard is nowhere near Mance's power level, but he is by far the best Stark commander. That's Eddard probably is Mance's level, but the rest of Stark isn't. Free folk. But yeah, Eddard's just good. Mance, I don't need to talk about Mance. He's just good. And Drogo, great for Targaryens. I know you've come out of the Targaryen kind of like mist and you've passed beyond that now, but it's
Yeah, they're back in the cupboard.
yeah, but he's almost too good. He's like in comparison to the other options, it's like the other options just aren't good enough. There is a fourth, as I say, there's a fourth one to join that list, which is Baelor.
I don't think the Drogo's that good.
No, but the thing is, he's not, right? He's not that good. It's just in comparison to the others.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah, like I just think that what's interesting about Targ specifically is I think that Targ infantry armies are a bit lackluster. It's not even though like no the units aren't bad, like they aren't, but it's just they even moved Swordmasters to 7, right? And Pikemen are at 7, and like in isolation they're both fine units and they're good. And I can't even tell you what's so lackluster about them, but they only have Drogo or Jaor. No, or Jorah.
yeah.
Drogo or Jorah for their cavalry. And Drogo is better than Jorah.
Yes.
And so he's really a one of two because they are so heavily leaning into cavalry style, I feel. I've barely seen a single Targaryen infantry army out there.
Yeah, and they don't perform that well when they are there. They don't do badly. We saw Grey Worm, I think, or Dario even. Dario, Stormcrow captain, picked up 2 wins out of 2 games. Now, that's a tiny little margin, played by probably 1 player. But he didn't do badly. He won his games. Greyjoy, Barristan went 3-0, or 0 for 3, which in comparison is awful on the flip side. But yeah, the thing is, the infantry lists aren't even being played. In comparison, they're just not being played.
For me, interestingly enough, I used to think that the Targaryen deck was good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't anymore. Like after having played it, I just don't think that the Targaryen deck itself is very good. So and even when you think about it like that, it's even worse for infantry. Like
yes,
the only thing that it is good for is cavalry, and it's not that good for cavalry. So for me, if you were going to play an infantry army, you just wouldn't, okay, maybe some people are Targaryen purists. The Targaryen purists all seem to play Drogo anyway, right? Like, or they play dragons or they play something, right? People aren't Targaryen purists for the infantry. And if you were playing them because you thought that they were a good army, you were talking about them competitively speaking, there's not much to sell you on Targaryens when you could play a different faction if you wanted to play infantry.
Yes.
So I think that's what leads to Drogo being so dominant as a pick. And I think that it's a bit of an issue that he is possibly also the strongest commander. But I think that it's only possible. It's just that he fits the faction in a way that no other commander does.
The big thing, and with season 1 saw this a little bit, but I think people went you mentioned the Unsullied Swordmasters. As a player who doesn't play that much Targ, not since a long time, I've not played Targ since 2021 really much. I enjoyed Targ in 1.6, not gonna lie, when they were shit before Mother Dragons. I actually enjoyed Nimble, Outrider, Spam, kind of like Screamer screens and stuff like that. I think it had play, it was interesting. The Drogo stuff doesn't interest me that much anymore. And the Unsullied coming down to 7 points straight away did not bother me whatsoever because they didn't change the unit being expensive was never really the problem. It was the functionality it always had. It never did anything at 8, and I didn't believe it was going to do anything at 7 either. Now, if you made it 5 points, then it can do nothing at 5 points. That's fine, or do nothing at 4 points. That's fine. But doing nothing at 7 is not really any different to doing nothing at 8. And if it's not doing anything, then why are you paying points for it? The minimum I feel that you can get to is 6. If you're paying more than 6 for something, it has to achieve a job in the game. At 6, you could arguably say it wasn't a good matchup for that particular unit, or it might have just done something small that wasn't that important. And at 5 and 4, you can just be like, that's just for the list. That's like, they make the list do its thing. And yeah, targ infantry just sucks. Mind you, that being said, maybe not enough of them run targ Stormcrow infantry, Stormcrow mercenaries everywhere. Maybe that's what we want. So yeah, it's yeah, it is what it is.
What's interesting about that list, though, that even Lannisters is a very small percentage, but Bruce Lannisters 70%.
Yep.
Where did the highest Lannister finisher finish?
It would have been Wop, I imagine, who came 4th.
With 4 and 1.
Yeah, 4 and 1.
You know, showing that even the worst faction, the worst thing that's actually a faction, is still viable.
He went for Roose every game except his first with Tyrion, into a Drogo list of all things. So it is always sad that Roose is the best Lannister commander out there.
Like it's not like he's a,
it's acceptable. He fits the theme.
Like it's almost lore. It's lore acceptable.
Yeah, but it is a little bit sad at the same time that Tywin is so bad.
Yeah,
like that is sad. Yeah. Anyway, we were going to talk about not just this event, but going to talk about other events. But actually, I mean, Gru said it in chat, and I did notice it about 20 minutes ago. But I was going to wait for it because this is actually news, right? Because we never changed off that screen. EU National Championships post by Simon today has just gone up. Thank you all for the great response from the community to our announcement of the EU National Champion events happening in 2022. We have been overwhelmed by the response from communities all over the EU region, and we're excited to add a few new entries to the EU National Championship schedule for 2022. So, let's see what we've got. We've got Moderna play in Italy on May 20th. So that's the Italian Nationals, which we've mentioned before, happening with the House of Orcs and the guys over there. Obviously, we chatted with those guys 3 weeks ago. I want to say it's 3, maybe 4 weeks ago. Go check out the episode from back then when we chatted to them about the event and all the stuff they're doing in prep for Italian Nationals. And they said we've sent over $1,000 in US dollars in retail product as prizes. So, awesome.
Get yourself over there.
Carlo, you're going to be happy here. As a reminder, the UK National Championships in London is coming along well, and the hosting groups, Northern Realms Gaming and A Song of Ice and Fire Stats, are putting in great work with their local community for an exciting event later this year. Be sure to check out the details October 1st. We've had Tabletop Warden and the Bedburg Tabletop Freud EV, along with Asmodee DE, talking about the German national event there. No mention of the World Cup in those statements there by Simon, just the German nationals. That's talking about that. Yeah, they've also talked about the French National Championship, the one happening in Bordeaux, that's been run by Labar Ateo. I am of the opinion that at some point we shall ask a member of the French community, probably Galanthil, I know he watches the show, to come on, talk about that. Maybe he's talked to some of the other guys who running that event. Maybe get them on here and chatting, because it's nice to hear from communities, isn't it? Polish distributor War Factory. They will be organising the Polish National Championship later this year, and will update us with more details as soon as things are set. Now, I'll straight up say this. That is a good thing. It is a great thing that a Song of Ice and Fire Poland is being recognised. It's great. I'm happy. I don't know about you, Carlo.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's awesome that the activity of the Polish community is being recognised, and that there'll be a Polish nationals.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. The last bit, we're honoured to be able to let the Song of Ice and Fire, the miniatures game community, know that the champions for these events happening around the world will be the first to qualify for our A Song of Ice and Fire tabletop miniatures game Tournament of Champions, currently planning for 2023. Each of our 2022 national champions around the world will be qualified for this event. This will include US and EU champions as well as Asia Pacific champions, whose the events are apparently planned later in the year in 2023. And they have said there that they're going to crown their first world champion next year. So, Simon have announced it now. It's a bit weird that it's in small print at the bottom and not bolded and actually part of this event thing that they're like, oh, by the way, we're running a World Championships, which all these things are now part of. But you know that thing earlier, Carlo?
I think if they led with the World Championships, then they would have had to give more details.
Yes. Yeah,
so,
maybe.
I mean, yeah. There's the official announcement. It's not it's not a mistranslation. Not and I guess that's what I was asking for, which is there is some more clarification, which is that all these national events, and interestingly, whether or not they mean it, because in the German one it said high finishers, and here it specifically says winners. Interesting that we'll find out exactly, maybe closer to the time, how many spots get offered out. But yeah, there you go. If you're a national championship, you are looking to qualify for a world championship. Not to change the whole subject, I'll be very interested to know how successful the participation in the US Nationals is based off of its qualification-based criteria. And then, how they will expect to run this Worlds, and whether or not they will be providing, help to get these players to this event. Because, the vast majority of people, if these people are going to play in these different national events and then congregate in a single physical location, there's going to be a huge amount of travel involved, of course. So I think that, if you expect a high percentage of the invited players to turn up, they really might need to offer help to these players. So hopefully it's all. We seem to have a lot of bot spams today in chat,
and
I'm not talking about Marwin. But yeah, I think big news. Big news.
Yeah, definitely. It's good news, right? It's good news. It is going to be hopefully amazing if it runs in the way that we hope it runs. And I'd be super interested. I'd be super interested how they determine players attending. I very much hope that they come up with an attendance system or a qualification system sooner rather than later. Mainly because people know what they're playing for. Is it going to be top 2, top 3, top 4, top 1? Is it just going to be top one, in which case the event's going to be like 8 people big, maybe slightly more, like 10, 12? Are certain countries going to get extra spots because they've had this regional, international, into world qualification thing? That will, not going to lie, that would not be pleasant. Especially knowing that some of those events, certainly like Bordeaux and the LGT, where attendance is over 100 players, is going to be quadruple the size of what is currently US Nationals. I believe they've got 22 players qualified. Um, I'm not going to be particularly happy if they turn around and say, "Oh yeah, and top 4 from every event go," and you're like, "We were like 5 times bigger." Like that's
Yeah, I think it's also interesting whether or not, you know,
yeah.
just in Tim. I also think I would be incredibly surprised, right? Like, I would be really genuinely surprised if they put in any kind of basically national requirements, right? Like,
Mhm.
if they turn around and said it's the top
X.
UK
Yeah.
national finisher at the UK nationals, right? That would be a very weird stipulation. I wouldn't expect them to add that. And yet, in a lot of ways, like that's sort of in place at the US, in that, like, it's very, very difficult for anybody outside the US to qualify for US nationals because they've chosen to make it invite only. Whereas the UK, LGT, and also Bordeaux, I know that Bordeaux will be expecting to get a good number of Germans, other, like, Western and Central Europeans outside of France. I'm not sure how many Italians and French and Belgians and
Mhm.
Poles be expecting to go to Bordeaux, but it being a huge event, I'm sure it will attract a lot. I'm, really, really happy to say that we are expecting a good number of internationals at the LGT. I know that there'll be a number of French players coming over, some Polish players, Italians, Spanish, Belgians. I think that they will all be very, very strong entrants,
Mhm.
and that you could very definitely, don't forget, only a couple of Poles came last time, and the event was won by a Polish player, right? The people who travel are generally the best players from their region, and there is a real likelihood that there won't be that many British players inside of the LGT top finishing positions. And so it's quite a different dynamic that actually, it would be very unfortunate if effectively UK players don't get to go to Worlds because the UK tournament that they can qualify from is so internationally popular.
Yeah.
Whereas the German event so far is looking to be heading towards 32 players, and I think that they will be looking overwhelmingly, announcing 10 weeks out means that it's very unlikely that people will travel from as far.
Mhm.
The French event and the LGT, they've been announced 6, 7, 8, 9 months out, much
It's
bigger, wider events, and
yeah,
they're
it's the size is
expecting
right.
and trying to generate as much international presence as popular. So I think it would be unfortunate if it effectively cost UK entrants their realistic chance of qualifying. But we'll
Same
just
with
have to
French.
see what happens.
So same with the French. I know that what is looking to be the French national championship. For those of you that aren't aware, Master of Westeros, we've talked about it a couple of times, was the largest event for Song of Ice and Fire ever run by the French, and that was about 100 players. They are hoping to match that, and if not beat it, at Bordeaux later this year. Um, if they do, and they're hopefully, the LGT gets the 128 that we're wanting to get and hoping that turn up on the day. We've already sold the tickets. Hopefully, that many people turn up. Um, if they smash that and they go like 130 or 140, which they have the capacity to do,
Yeah.
um, those would be the 2 largest events of the Song of Ice and Fire ever held in the world. And I'm not suggesting here that the German Nationals is somehow lesser. It isn't. The German Nationals is still just a very, very good tournament, and I expect it to be very good. But I do think that it would be a massive shame to have the World Championships be like that one guy at LGT who won it, like Suavek, that one guy from Master of Westeros who won it, that one guy from the Italian event, because those smaller national events, I mean, the Italian one is looking at 20 to 30 players. Um, it it incentivizes going to small events and qualifying through the smaller events, which
Yeah.
you know, I don't think it would be particularly appropriate for someone like Carlo. You know, Carlo's a very good example of this, who is kind of running the LGT, so he can't qualify. It would be a bit inappropriate for him to rock up to some Italian like 20-man event and throw his dice on the table and go, well, this is the place I'm going to try and do my job. And Carlo's a very good player. He might not be the best player there. He might not win. But if he wins it and takes the space off an Italian, it's like,
Yeah, no.
sucks.
So that's interesting, of course, because like so it is an interesting point, because when you look at Italy, also in the reverse, I am not exactly sure, but I believe that Jasper, the best known Italian player, is running Italian nationals and won't be competing. I'm not entirely sure if he's not competing, but I believe he won't be competing. And that's very similar to myself and Chris, who are two of the more widely recognizable UK tournament players. We will be running the LGT and not competing. I don't know if that's the same for Ilya, at German nationals and all these things. And it's interesting that if those players are unable to compete and unable to qualify, then they will obviously, I know from my own personal perspective, I will be looking therefore to qualify, say, at another country's nationals. I will be looking to go to somebody else's nationals and with the real genuine intent to go there and take the spot off of somebody from that country, because I can't earn it in my own country, because I am effectively self-excluded from the fact that I am running the event which has the qualifying spot.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's actually, it's fine that I have the capability, that I am looking to go to US nationals and the French nationals. I won't be spitting my dummy out and saying I missed my only opportunity. That's unfair. I can't qualify because I'm running the event. No, I have other chances to qualify. It does make me wish that I had the time to go to Italian nationals and to German nationals, because if I had all the time in the world, I would. I would go to all these events, particularly because I want to play at this Worlds event. Every opportunity that I have to qualify, I will be looking at with more seriousness now. And so it's interesting that there may genuinely be a lot of national events not won by their own nationals. Simply because of the qualification criteria that you've put on it, and that you are looking to create these situations where people want to travel to qualify, possibly in the same way that I think that a number of the more closely distance-wise US national qualifiers are being qualified by and won by players who aren't from that local scene, because they are the players who are willing to travel to earn themselves a spot. Like they know that they want to go to US nationals, and that they are going to travel to events until they have qualified and they have secured a spot. And that is then possibly taking places away from more local players who they're not willing to travel to any and every qualifier that they can. And this was their one chance. Quite an interesting system. I can't necessarily propose a better one without, saying run an ELO ranking system. But, that is a very advanced concept, that they are running a qualification system, and that it is open for people to see what it is and to know and understand, and to give people more opportunity to qualify, are all great things. And I'm stoked. I'm now that I know for sure, that all these other national events that I was already looking at going to are qualifiers. I feel great about it. All I ever personally want is an opportunity. Like if I can go and win, you could tell me I have to beat 10 players in a row, right? If there is an opportunity for me to earn a spot, that's all I need.
Now, for those of you who don't know, this is seeing Carlo into tryhard mode. You don't see it very often, not publicly anyway, but Carlo in tryhard mode goes...
Yeah.
He goes vacant. It's really weird. He actually goes vacant slightly behind the eyes, and his face doesn't change from a very serious expression. And I'm 90% sure he's just plugged himself in and Carlo bot's taken over, and the supercomputer's just, right, where do we go now? You don't see it often, but I can see it on his face now, so...
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I did, some people were asking, hey, why has Carlo been playing on TTS? It is the first start of me considering for the first time in a while, like, about 9 months or so. At the very least, since the Scottish GT. Though I wasn't like super invested in that tournament. It's the first time for quite a while that I've decided, I want to do well, right? And I think, as I always spoke about in the past, that like I'm not super into playing on TTS, but there is no better way to become a better player. And so just getting out there and starting to play people, I'm quite selective over who I play. Like I'm looking to play people that I know I will be challenged by and learn from. And so, like I'm generally speaking quite, I don't just go looking for game with a random player. I'm also still quite busy, so unfortunately I still probably can't commit to playing in tournaments, playing one game a week, which I also think is the best way to like really understand whether or not you can cut it, because some people's tournament mindset is very different to their non-tournament mindset, and it also stops you from meeting certain kinds of like really weird lists. But anyway, I re-entered the TTS sphere and started looking for more TTS games as a steady ramp up towards the fact that I want to be good at the game again by the time I go to the US.
Yeah. Which is completely legit thing. July? Gen Con? Is it July?
Yeah, Gen Con, well,
the event.
First week of August, possibly the last weekend of July.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to have to win LGT now, aren't I? Shit. Or go to some of the other ones. Although I don't know if I'll get leave to go to other countries. Yeah. Shit. Challenges on.
There you go. Stats goes try hard.
To be fair, I said last year that I'd make it to the final of LGT, and I lost to Othel because I wasn't running 7 Raiders. This year, I will run 7 Raiders if it means going to Worlds. Then take neutral to Worlds. No, don't take me on that one. I am definitely not going to. Actually, neutrals might be easier to take to Worlds because it packs smaller. Can you pack a? Yeah. My army will just be a sign that says, "I concede." Just take that to. There we go. There's my army. Yep, crushing victory for you. Move on. Right. No. There. That was cool. That was cool.
It is cool. Like
yeah.
It's interesting that obviously it'll only affect a very small number of players.
Yeah.
A very small number of players will qualify. Maybe 5 to 10 times as many players, probably 5, will it will affect them in that they will really want to qualify, right? Like maybe 5 times as many people as do qualify will really set out with the intent to do so. Yeah. You'll have players like Bloodraven who will probably qualify while claiming that they didn't want to.
Specifically,
the greatest casual that ever existed.
Specifically that he wasn't trying.
Yes. And and so that's still only a very small part of the wider song community, right? But that it creates a reason to be good at the game. It is very similar to how I always believe that the competitive community is a positive for song, like as a whole. It is not a drain on the casual player base. It helps to push forward the casual player base. It helps to create the FAQs. It helps to create a more balanced game. It helps to create, interesting interactions. That's where nearly all of song content comes from. It's where the people who love the game most and create about the game and speak about the game all come from. In exactly the same way, having a really, really specific, really elite goal for even the competitive community, I will believe will help to push forward the competitive community itself. It means that there is a reason, even the good players who want to continue to be even better and to push themselves forward.
Carlo, many moons ago, you released a video. Song of Ice and Fire stats chat 18 is a Song of Ice and Fire competitive. A Song of Ice and Fire dead. If you were to answer that question now, with the reveals of today and everything that we've known over the last kind of couple of years, what would you say to that now?
Well, interestingly, if I remember rightly off that video was talking about the languish between the Visions and the Flames and 2021 and particularly Greyjoy release, right? And that we saw a humongous decline in TTS events, in people playing games at all, in-person events were non-existent because everybody was waiting for the balance patch. Obviously, I think that is it dead? No, absolutely not. It is the most thriving that it has been.
That'll do me.
I mean, it harks back to the reason I created a Song of Ice and Fire stats. It was never to prove anything. I don't I don't have a competitive agenda. I don't give a crap if one NCU or 3 NCU is better. Yeah. I built it because I believed that it helps the community. I believe having a competitive community helps the community. I believe having a very structured ranking system helps the community. I believe these things because only games that I've ever cared about in the past have all of these things. And I felt that CMON were not going to provide them. I mean, they still have not. What a Song of Ice and Fire stats has become, I obviously, personally, I don't think that CMON will ever provide that. And so, it's no longer just, shall we say, like a placeholder until CMON do it. But I was always trying to lead CMON down a road of, you should do this. This will help your game. This is required to make your game successful, in my opinion. It seems that they are maybe catching up, at least in some part. And I think that's really, really good. I would rather enter the London Grand Tournament that CMON ran than run it. I would rather CMON had an ELO system than I made it. I would rather there was a competitive ranking structure that they officially endorsed. If they did, I would fight to be number one. I do not fight to be number one of my own ranking system because that feels worthless to me. Because I made it. Not because it's not officially ranked or anything like that, but it feels false because it's my system. And so I make all these things which I wish CMON would make. And so every single thing that they do, which is at all similar to it, is a brilliant step forward for me.
on the mention of you not wanting to be at the top of your own ranking list as well, is obviously the fact that we all know that you can just give yourself ELO like you often do. You pretend to play games and then just go, oh look, I'll give myself 80 ELO for that. Which we all know happens and is definitely true and has got nothing to do with the fact that you just happen to beat people quite a lot. And no one here's met Dan, right? No one else here has met Dan. Dan is a figment of mine and Carlo's combined consciousness, by which point Carlo has manifested Dan as a fake person that Carlo then beats or gets beaten by sometimes just to make it so it's not completely false. Anyway, no, I'm wicked. I'm stoked for it. I'm in the same boat as you. I'd much rather that Simon did all of this shit, because we could then talk about Simon, all the things that Simon does. Maybe we wouldn't even have to do this. Shit. Yeah, there's that option too.
Yeah, I'd rather they had a weekly podcast than we'd made one.
Yeah, I know, right?
I mean, I'd turn up every week, just like all the faithful watchers in the chat, and I would post shit. But yeah,
yeah,
just trying to lead them down the path that I think that the game needs. You can agree or not. You can think that I'm the worst thing that ever happened to Song of Ice and Fire. That's fine. Absolutely. Also, I am, as people are well aware, I am a deeply flawed person. So if Simon just did it, it would be better. It wouldn't, it wouldn't be made by. Although, am I a worse person than Michael Chanel? That's a tough question.
Wow. Putting out all the stops there. I think you probably are. Like you're worst person definitely, because you're borderline not human. So soulless versus fragment of soul. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, cool. There you go. So that was random news that dropped. It feels like everything that we now cover is going to be mildly pointless compared to that. Yeah. TTS qualifiers going on. Your invitational qualifier, that's going on. We've entered
you know what?
quarters.
It's getting spicy. We're down to
quarterfinals.
Quarterfinals. One of them's already played. Jacob beat Suista today.
Mm-hmm.
They're all the top 4 seeds are still in. We'll see if Tom and his Neutrals Crusade can survive the quarterfinals. He's really taking them strong, showing why he's such a good player. I mean, if you've been following along in the NRG Discord, the roller coaster that is Nigel is still in, and everybody's loving it. Every week, I'm sure he's definitely going to lose this time, and he manages to get through. So we'll see. But yeah, I think there's some really good players and really interesting mix of factions. Factions as well. We've got everything from Barra, Greyjoy, Targ, Neutral, Free Folk. Do we have a Lannister?
No.
I think all our Lannisters went out. There we go. Yeah.
We only
Interestingly,
had
all our Night's Watch players went out in round 1.
Yeah. I think all our Lannisters went out in round 1 as well, I think. Yeah, Lannister and Night's Watch all dropped out in 1.
So, we've still got a relatively wide spread of players. Now, I'm not going to say that this is like quite of the quality. Going back to the balance and where the game's at and stuff like that. It's not quite of the quality of the TTS Masters, which was, the top 16 TTS players in the world at the time. The TTS Masters, though, if we remember, like 100% of the people who made it out of first round were like Night's Watch or Free Folk.
No, Stark Free Folk.
Stark or Free Folk. Sorry.
No, it was Mother of Dragons, right? Oh, that World Cup. Was Mother of Dragons World Cup? Masters was before? I can't remember.
There were 2, or at very best, 3 builds in the entire tournament after the first round. In this, we're seeing at least 5 factions, if not 10 different builds being played, probably more around the 8 region. But obviously, we have a wider variety of player skill. But I think that is very, very interesting to see the performance of a lot more things, stay pretty high level. This is still a very high average player skill entered into the tournament. It's still a very competitive event.
Yeah, I've just had a double check on the old website. I do believe that Song of Ice and Fire Masters was before Mother of Dragons was released. That was the one obviously won by Larks. Whereas Mother of Dragons Fest was later in the year with Tobo at the World Cup.
The World Cup.
Yeah.
So by the World Cup, we effectively had 3 competitive builds. We had Starks, MOD, and Free Folk, right?
Yeah.
But during the World Cup, during the TTS Masters, we had Stark and Free Folk, but with a tiny pinch of Gregor-based Lannisters, I believe. Mountain that Rides-based Lannisters was the possible thirds.
Wasn't it
now,
Baratheons
I can't remember
randomly?
whether or not we allowed Mountain that Rides into the Masters or not.
I don't think we did it. I think it was Baratheon.
Yeah.
After it was George, wasn't it? George got a Baron mirror into something else. I can't remember. And took Baratheons, I think, to round 2, maybe, or round 3. After, and that was it. And then it was Free Folk and stuff. And Worlds was literally just, apart from Ardeep, who did well in the initial round with his Baratheons. I think that was just the 3. And even then, it wasn't even like the Starks had 2 builds. They had the Rob and the Howland, but Free Folk had Harmer in Sig, basically, and that was it. And then later on, it was not even Targaryens, it was Mother of Dragons. It was Harmer in Sig mixed with Steer Mammoth, and Howland and Rob. The only time we've actually ever seen, like, now I think back to it, Starks and their dominance is the only time we've actually seen a dominant 2 list pairing rather than dominant 1 list that then carries a second list. Offal John was about the closest we got, and let's be brutally honest, that was mostly carried by Offal. It was really carried by Offal. Free Folk, the Harmer Steer thing worked, but in Sig spam, Mammoths were broken. They were dumb. It was still in Sig spam that was winning games. Mother of Dragons obviously was just Mother of Dragons. There was no alt list, except different Mother of Dragons. I think that's actually, now I think about it, it's the only time we've actually seen a 2 list pairing where both commanders solidly performed well above the pack.
That's true. It was interesting because effectively one was I will fight everything else in the game, and the other was I will fight my mirror.
Yes. Interesting.
Bring back NCU commanders? No.
They're
the best.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna say I think NCU commanders going is probably the best thing that's happened. Yeah, I think that is probably the best change. Still not sure changing NCUs to 4 points over 3 has made that much of a difference outside of just bringing everyone's activations down. I don't really think it made that big a difference to the game.
No, it didn't. It didn't stop. Well, it's made 2 NCUs versus 3, or even 1 NCUs versus the 2/3 less far behind.
Yes,
but it hasn't made it. Yeah,
but not eradicated said gap. Cool. Yeah. Well, obviously, we'll see how this one plays out. We've got, I think, Nige and Podwis are playing tomorrow night at 7 p.m. UK time. Myself and Blood are playing tomorrow night at 9 p.m. my time. And the only other one is the Tom and Magyar Khan. And I don't know if he's got the time for that yet. Might set the time for that.
I mean, Magyar Khan's been an absolute tear. He actually came into the event as the second lowest rated player,
Mhm.
and he's been knocking out some big names. His first round he took out Masara,
Mhm.
and followed that up by with Pax Dax. But now going into Tom, I believe, yeah, he is
Yep.
versus Winter is coming next. So we'll see if he gets through that one. But yeah, he's showing that some people's rankings don't mean a thing. Some 6 out of the 8 players still in the event are this 6 top rated players. So, it's not, they don't mean nothing.
It's just elite Teddy's maybe just not that good. Nigel's clearly better than elite Teddy. So much for this blog, eh? He clearly needs to learn from his own blog. Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to the rest of the event. There's a lot more to go. Find it. There we go. A lot more to go, obviously. And what I like most about this event, there is actually likelihood that it's not high, but there is a likelihood we might see mirrors happening at the semi-finals. But we will not see a faction mirror in the final at all. It's not possible for a faction mirror to happen in the final. With myself playing up against Bloodraven, that's Free Folk or Greyjoy, playing into Sir Jacob's Free Folk in the next round. And then either that's going to be Free Folk or Greyjoy going into the final from that side of the bracket. And then you've got Baratheon, Targ, neutral Targ on the other side, meaning that the best we get is a Free Folk mirror on one side and a Targ mirror on the other. If I'll say the best, the worst we can get into a Targ Free Folk final. But yeah, it's nice to know that we've not got mirrors happening everywhere as well.
Yeah.
I think that's especially not in the final. Yeah.
I think it's never been harder to predict the meta, to predict a tournament, to predict what to watch out for when you enter an event yourself. Which, as I say, leads into this idea. I think it's never been harder to be a really, really good player, because the amount of things that you need to be prepared for and need to watch out for and need to have knowledge of is higher than it's ever been. In the past, there only had, I felt that if I knew 2-3 builds, then I knew the whole game. If I knew the important cards of like 4 commanders, and like 3 factions, kind of like that was it. That was the competitive game. Everything else I just make up on the fly, and they weren't strong enough to cause a problem. Whereas right now, I feel like you need to know everything that could be thrown at you and how you're going to deal with it.
Yep.
And I think that is a really exciting place for the competitive community to be.
That's the topic of Teddy's last post, the Gotcha Hammer idea. Read up. If you want to be genuinely a good player, we've said it before. Literally, just go and learn stuff. Learn every card. Learn the trigger specifically is the important thing, but obviously the effect. Yeah, there's no point sitting here being like, I need to learn this trigger of like start of round and this happening and this happening and this happening, and the effect is nothing because, no, don't go and learn Belwas's stuff, for example. But yeah, no, go and learn. Everyone's going to pick Belwas as like an underpicked hero and be like, no one knows Belwas's cards. I'll capture people, and then it'll be mostly people catching themselves, being like, why the fuck is this so shit? But yeah, no, go and learn the big 4 at least. As Chris says, you need to know every card in the Targ deck. You need to know every card in the Night's Watch deck, every card in the Free Folk deck, every card probably in the Baratheon deck, because actually the Baratheon cards aren't trash anymore. You need to know at least the big commanders of each faction, if not more. Know the cards, know the triggers, know what's coming up, and then remember if the Baratheon draws Sustained Assault that you can laugh at them because the card is truly awful. So, shall we leave it there for this week outside of going through tournaments? Like the
Absolutely.
up and coming? Yeah?
Yes.
So, upcoming tournaments. I am just going to have to rattle through these because this list gets longer every single time I have to do this. we've got the appropriately named Battle at the Wall happening tomorrow in Russia. So if you're not signed up for that and you're in Russia or near Russia or want to travel to Russia, sign up for that event and go to that Russian event. That's happening tomorrow. You've got a couple of hours left to sign up. Maybe. There's the Break the Meta TTS tournament. This is a tournament hosted by Susta. He is doing this in a somewhat European and international standpoint for a small event happening on TTS, while the US TTS event happens, which is being put up. It's Susta's way of saying we matter too. Yeah, you do. Hey.
I think you've just done. I think you've just done the Simon faux pas there. By the way, I'm pretty sure it's an NA event.
Sorry. Is it actually NA? I thought they said.
I think it's NA. I think it's based on time zone. It's not.
It might be NA, not US.
On US only.
Apologise. There's a Song of Ice and Fire till Coruscant Con even. Another event happening in Denmark. Great. More Danish community. We've seen them kind of crop up and do some stuff over the last couple of months, so that's great. We've also got happening War for the Wall, not to be confused with Battle for the Wall. Don't sign up for that one because you'll end up in Russia. This one you end up in Durham in the UK, obviously hosted by that man, who hopefully won't be playing in said event because we'll have full players and even numbers, but he may play in it because, you know.
I think currently I am. Currently I will be the 20th player. If everybody turns up. Big if.
I mean, we've already established that Carlo has no friends, so playing a one-man event, which is what we're expecting, is probably not going to happen. Of course, Carlo will make it pretend it's 20, and he'll give himself a little gold cup just to prove a point. No. We've also got another event happening in Poland. I might just have an audio cue now, which I click a button, and it goes, there's an event in Poland. There's an event. Just do that every time. We've got one happening in Allen Road in Lexington, Kentucky. Cool. Awesome. We've got the North American Invitational. This is the North American TTS event. They've called it North American Invitational. Don't know why, but that's there. If you're an NA player looking to play online on TTS, that's starting up this weekend as well. Just going to go double check how many players the TTS events have obviously got signed up to them. The NA one is currently looking at 17 so far, with one on the waiting list 18, and our EU one has 16. Cool. So, you know, decent player numbers there. We've got Touch Bourbon. Things pronouncing that right. Happening on Sunday in Saint-Denis in Laurienne. Oh, that's the island reunion, right? That's the
if possibly
random island one we were talking about before. Yeah, on the island. Yeah.
There we go.
There we go. It's him. He's running the event on the island. I assume he's got players going to it, and he knows those players. So hopefully that goes really well. I'm going to randomly check that one out next Monday, and if people turn up and it's cool, that's awesome. We've also got Battle for White Harbour 4 happening. That's the Rotterdam event happening. It's been on their site for a little while. They've got an event happening on Sunday this week. Fantastic. There's another event in Poland on Sunday in Warsaw. Need I say any more? A Starter Box tourney happening in Carrollton, Texas, at Texas Toy Soldiers. Starter Box tournament. We've seen they've been quite popular recently, which is a good thing because it usually means people are getting into the game, right? So, yeah. And then after that, it's can we believe
really
it?
Not long to the Italian National Championships, and we'll find out the first person who qualifies for Worlds.
Yeah. Are you signing up and going then?
Unfortunately, not at 1 week's notice.
Let's see what they've got. So they've got some Spanish players going. They've got Titus is going. Felipe Titus is going, and wow, a load of Italians on the waitlist as well. Most of them from
I think it's a 32-player max, right? 32-player cap, max. I think. And yeah, also that it's full up.
It
would
is
be
full
the
up.
other problem.
Yeah, I mean,
According to Melkor.
hey, they're not off the waiting list yet. They may not get accepted.
Yeah, money can free anything up, Melkor.
It's a shame that Carlo hasn't got any.
No, we've already ascertained that I'm a secret millionaire.
Is it like on stats? Stats now just is also connected to an international bank, and you've just logged in as an admin and put some zeros on the end of your last. Nice. He's actually
Yeah,
a
I
secret
mean, I've
villain.
been saying it for a while, but this is looking like a really, really good event. You know, like
Yeah.
really glad that that they got the nationals title thrown in there. That Asmodee are sending them over. I mean, I don't know why it was Asmodee themselves who were like, by the way, we're sending, or Simon were like, by the way, we're sending them $1,000 worth of stuff. Like, but that's brilliant. It means that we're talking like literally like $30 per entrant in terms of prize support coming back to these players, which is not dissimilar to what the LGT was able to do last time. Which is great that they're supporting these events this much.
Mm-hmm.
That like people know that these supported events will get such good support can hopefully, I mean, it's not going to help the Italians now. Their event is already full and it's a bit late for that kind of announcement. But this will hopefully really push the German event forward, really push its entrance. Like honestly, it might be too late for the LGT. I think that's already full at 128. We haven't even checked in for a while because we're so sure of it. But if you're on the fence, try and sign up for the LGT. There will be a waiting list. If it's already sold out, then we'll be generating names and helping people move on their tickets if they can't make it to the event. And I'm sure it will help the French event be as big as possible. People know that they can expect something around this level of support in terms of coming away with prizes, but also, more importantly, that we're fighting for the big prize of coming away with a spot at Worlds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I'm hyped.
I really hope and expect that the French event will be looking at around the 150 mark,
Mm-hmm.
bigger and better than they managed to achieve before COVID. I hope that they're bigger and better than the LGT. We were I think we were right to pick our cap at 128 this year, but I hope that next year we can be talking in the closer to the 256, doubling again in size is what I'm really hoping for, and that will show just like the growth of the community, and hopefully that can give the response back to Simon that if they provide for the competitive community, it will grow. By extension, the whole game will grow.
Yeah.
And that's what we all hope for.
Definitely, 100%. I know I'm going to be following that, obviously with close eyes. Thankfully, it's not this weekend because obviously I'd have been super busy in Durham this weekend. But next weekend, obviously, I can watch the Italian nationals all play out and see who's winning. I'll be following along with it as we go, seeing what's going on there. And hopefully, if we get the opportunity, I'll drop a message to Jasper as well, see if he can join us to tell us all how it goes. Have him back on because he's a nice guy. I like Jasper. I like a lot of people we have on here. Much nicer than Carlo.
Not a high barrier.
It's not. All right, so that is a grand total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 events happening this weekend. Jesus Christ, although 2 of them are TTS events
Low
over
weekend.
time. So a slow weekend, nothing really happening in Song of Fire this weekend. And with that, guys, we will call it there. Just nothing happening. Sign up for events. Play events. Play Song of Fire. Song of Fire is a great game. It's really balanced. Look how balanced it is. Balanced.
I like missing off neutrals there. I mean, it really does help the balance if you miss neutrals off. But,
you can have the logo, just not the ELO. Balanced. There we go. So I'll just say balanced a few more times. Really get everyone's mojo going. But yeah, thank you all very much for tuning in. Any last words, Carlo?
Let's find out if Mickey can win 2 cups.
1 Mickey, 2 cups. No, that sounds like a very bad thing to search in your Google bar. All right then. Thanks a lot for joining us this week, guys. We will catch you all again next week, and I hope everyone has a great week of A Song of Ice and Fire. Take it easy. Ready, aim, release! Anyone see my mammoth?